ADHD impacts executive function, and one of the first elements of executive function is self-awareness. So awareness of who you are in the world. And if you're not aware of who you are in the world, it's difficult to go through life because it's like you're kind of going through life naked, going, am I wearing this outfit? Am I wearing that outfit? Who am I in the world? And whilst there is a really enjoyable adaptability because you can adapt, there is also a vulnerability because you don't have an exterior shell.
Dr. Judith Mohring is a Cambridge-educated psychiatrist,
a medical professional, and expert in all things ADHD.
Specializing in women's mental health.
Her mission is to help ADHD women understand themselves better
and optimize their amazing, unique brains.
So what I see amongst my ADHD coaching clients is a delightful lack of narcissism associated very often with a vulnerability because there's a sense of who am I in the world. With ADHD, there's an overactive default mode network. And the overactive default mode network means that we're very good at taking other people's points of view on, adapting to them. I call it pretzeling. You twist yourself into the shape that's required of
fascinating.
you.
What do you think the toll of feeling lost, forgotten, misunderstood, what does that do to someone's mental health over time? Loyal listeners and viewers, I can't thank you enough for tuning in. If you've ever felt broken or different, I hope this helps in your search for answers and community. And do you know what would really help me in return? By clicking the follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening. It might not seem like much, but at ADHD Chatter, it means a huge deal. And with this, I can book more incredible guests and keep the self-discovery fire alive for all of us, myself included. Just one click of a button goes really far. And remember, you have always been enough. What is your mission in terms of the ADHD community and mental health?
Such a great question. Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you so much also for asking me on because I'm really passionate about sharing high quality information with people. And ADHD is both wonderfully complex and also wonderfully simple. So the science is complex. Sometimes the answers are quite simple. And I have a real passion for sharing that evidence-based science with people so they don't have to wait to have an assessment. They don't have to wait to see a doctor. And they don't have to just have medicines. They can also use skills to help themselves get better. So that's my real passion, is to see the light bulbs go on, see people inspired and go, oh, that's what I can do. That will help. So that's why I'm here. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I see so many people in the community, particularly women. I'm sure you're familiar with it. They have that light bulb moment and suddenly so much makes sense.
Yes.
I read on your website that your special interest is women's mental health.
Yep.
So I suppose, have you noticed any trends in your work in perhaps... If you are a female with undiagnosed ADHD, what particular struggles there might be for that person?
That's really interesting because one of the things about ADHD that I think we're only just beginning to understand, and I'm really clear that ADHD is emerging. The science is new. It's emerging. Many of the papers that I quote have only come out in the last 4 or 5 years, is that ADHD is really tidal. And what I mean by tidal is that we know that noradrenaline and dopamine are dysregulated. Not low, they're dysregulated, which means that when the tide is out and we're zoned out and we're not focused and we're not concentrating, we've got low noradrenaline and dopamine. But then when the tide rushes in and you've got high dopamine, noradrenaline, you have hyperfocus, you've got hyperenergy. So you've got this real tidal variation in your energy levels and your focus. And it looks really confusing, both to the individual, to their friends, their colleagues, and also to doctors. Because doctors have a kind of thing called present mental state, which is how is the client now? And if you have ADHD, how you are now could be really different from how you are in half an hour or even an hour, because the tide may be in or it may be out. Does that analogy make sense to you?
Oh, totally. I mean, how many people have had, by bosses, by partners, you got drastic mood swings?
Yeah, drastic mood swings. And so you get told you're moody or you get told you're difficult because it's like, but you were different yesterday. Who are you today? And it's almost like your neuroscience is kind of quasi-gaslighting you because of this variability. Now, I'm going to caveat that with the fact that this is, there are a few papers that show this difference, and it's called the difference in tonic, which is resting, dopamine, and phasic, which is dopamine when we are rewarded or stimulated. So there are a few papers that reference this. And from talking to experts in the field, this is what we think is going on. It's very hard to evidence in live people, but we do have a few studies.
Fast forward a bit, someone gets a diagnosis or they become aware that they might have ADHD. Do you notice that their struggles might shift a little bit from that ebbs and flow you were just talking about to perhaps a new territory, a new area of frustration? Why am I just finding out now? Do you see a new sort of type of struggle pop up after diagnosis?
So there's a couple of things that happen after diagnosis. And I think the first thing to say is that neurodiversity, I tend to say this when I'm teaching doctors, neurodiversity is like the soil in which other conditions grow. So neurodiversity it's not a disease. It's you can be diagnosed neurodivergent with ADHD or autism. You can be diagnosed with it, but it's actually a way of being wired. It's who you are. But within that way of being wired, other conditions can grow. So you might be neurodivergent and also have severe anxiety or OCD or an addiction problem or any of these other issues. And so what we see is, first of all, we see that people say, well, my ADHD is a bit better under control now, but I'm still struggling with OCD symptoms, or I'm still struggling with an addiction problem or an eating disorder. So we see that. So we see that shifting. And we also see you and I talked earlier about coming out. That kind of, now it all makes sense. And I definitely had, I read your book and thought, now it all makes sense. So for me, coming out with ADHD was like, that's why my nickname for myself is Last Minute Lucy. So you have this kind of mixture of shame and relief. And it takes time. It takes probably 2 or 3 years to really kind of come to terms with the fact that your life has been it has run in particular patterns because of who you are in the world.
With coming out, do you think, what are the reasons somebody might not feel comfortable coming out? And I mean, in reference perhaps in the workplace or even within your family or friendship unit. Are there particular points of fear that might stop somebody from coming out?
I think it's difficult to explain to somebody that there's an invisible difference in your brain that means that you experience the world in a different way. And so there's a lot of dismissing. So people are like, don't be ridiculous. So I've had, really, very clever, very well-off people saying, neurodiversity is a fad, neurodiversity is indulgent, this is a middle-class diagnosis, you want special treatment. So there's dismissal. There's often a lot of shame within ADHD, the ADHD world anyway, because of that whole kind of why can't you be more normal? And why do you keep screwing up in this very particular way? So there's the shame piece, there's the dismissing, and then also there's the power dynamics, that if you're a young person in a business, you and I run our own businesses, so we are lucky that we can adapt the businesses around our neurodiversity. But if you are a junior in a business saying, would you mind adapting to me, is a big ask. So there's loads of reasons it's tricky to come out.
A question I'm asked quite a lot is what are some of the biggest myths that are surrounding ADHD, and how could that impact someone's comfortability in wanting to come out? And I think it's like, a lot of people still think that only boys can have ADHD. The ADHD is only physical hyperactivity. And it's quite easy to debunk those. But one of the biggest hurdles I find with speaking to people in the community, the biggest barrier stopping them from comfortably disclosing to their family or to their boss, is that they don't think that person thinks ADHD is real. What would you say to someone who didn't think ADHD was real?
Wow, it's a really good question. And I think there's lots of evidence that we've known about the construct for over 200 years. So there's books written like in the late 18th century describing an ADHD construct. So we know that it's been around for a very long time. We know that treatments have existed that help since probably the 50s. We know that the diagnostic constructs across countries are valid. So we have different diagnostic constructs across different countries. And I suppose in a way, it's about society slowly coming to terms with this, because nobody was talking ADHD. I only trained to diagnose ADHD about 10 years ago, and I'm a mental health professional. We weren't talking about it. So we're kind of on the sort of journey that other people might be about, sexuality, that kind of, this is a very normal way of being, but it does have an impact, and we need to talk about it. So I think it's sort of slow and steady, and find your allies. And I think certainly someone like me, I'm a middle-aged woman, so explaining to other middle-aged people who maybe don't believe in neurodiversity is kind of an important bit of allyship for other generations. So, yeah.
85%, in fact, I think it might be closer to 90% now. 90% of people that listen to this podcast or watch it are women.
Yep.
And I think that they watch it and they tune in because they have felt lost, forgotten, misunderstood for years and years and years, and they're seeking answers. What do you think the toll of feeling lost, forgotten, misunderstood, what does that do to someone's mental health over time?
It's very interesting, because what you're naming is actually one of the core features of ADHD. It's not in the diagnostic constructs. But ADHD impacts executive function. And one of the first elements of executive function is self-awareness. So awareness of who you are in the world. And if you're not aware of who you are in the world, it's difficult to go through life because it's like you're kind of going through life naked, going, am I wearing this outfit? Am I wearing that outfit? Who am I in the world? And whilst there is a really enjoyable adaptability because you can adapt, there is also a vulnerability because you don't have an exterior shell. So what I see amongst my ADHD coaching clients and the people who come to my courses is a delightful lack of narcissism associated very often with a vulnerability because there's a sense of who am I in the world. And so, yeah, I think the other thing, and you mentioned this in your book, with ADHD, there's an overactive default mode network. And we come to that later on because we've touched a bit on neurotransmitters, but we need to talk about networks too. And the overactive default mode network means that we're very good at taking other people's points of view on and adapting to them. I call it pretzeling. Because you twist yourself into the shape that's required of you.
Fascinating. That's a new way to look at it, but yeah, fascinating.
Because you talked about that in your book, didn't you? That kind of
I mean, new imagery with the pretzel, yeah.
The pretzel. And I know myself, one of the reasons I was really good at being a psychiatrist was that I could see that different clients needed different things. So I would pretzel to what they needed, but it didn't leave any space for me. And so my coming out has been to begin to emerge into the world and unpretzel and go, actually, I am a bit of a bit different. And so it has a massive impact. And again, that's why we come back to coming out, because when you come out, you can explore, does this really feel authentic or not?
Yeah, no, so true. I think people with ADHD, we're the world's best actors. Like if there was an Academy Award for playing a character called Normal, we'd be on stage accepting it. We're experts at, we're chameleons. We're so good at, copying, masking, mirroring other behaviors, essentially putting everyone else's needs ahead of yours, and the knock-on effects of what that does to your self-esteem, I think, can be really detrimental.
Yes.
It's so interesting, the self-awareness piece you mentioned, because I truly, having spoken to 300 amazing people on this podcast, thousands of people in the community, I truly don't believe ADHD is a deficit of attention. I think when we find something that captivates us and is a true alignment with our core, we have an abundance of attention. There's no stopping us. I think ADHD is more along the lines of a deficit of a self-awareness because of what you've mentioned, all of those years of changing, adapting, switching up your interests to please someone else other than yourself. Do you think that ADHD could be more of a deficit of self-awareness, and what steps could someone take to flex that muscle of self-awareness?
Yeah, so self-awareness is so key. So, and I agree with what you're saying as well, Alex, about it's not a deficit of attention. We now think it should be called attention dysregulation because, as I say, it's tidal. When the tide is out, no, you cannot remember where your car keys are. I'm quite proud of myself. I've never lost the children, but I have lost more or less everything else, including at some points in my mind. I've lost many things. But so there's this deficit of attention at times, and then other times, so I really love a bit of hyperfocus, and I'm never happier than when reading academic articles and digging deep into the default mode network, etc. So there's this dysregulation. But then when we shift to think about the networks, the brain networks, definitely in terms of identity, in terms of who we are, there is at times a difficulty in holding onto a solid self-construct. And so part of what I suggest to people is, I know Leanne Maskell says journal. Journaling's been really, really helpful for me. Breath work, so simply coming back into the body. Really simple mindfulness techniques that you can use. So I have a who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? How long have I got? So that very simple, using kind of Russell Barkley's executive function network model, but just reminding yourself, who am I in the world? So I'm Judith, where am I? I'm in the studio with Alex. What are we doing? We're doing a podcast.
Yes, so true. I think it's often hard to distinguish between what you and who you really are and what is the mask. And I think it's so important to pay attention to your knee-jerk emotional reactions. And what I mean by that is, say you're reading a newspaper and you see an advert for a musical theatre role and you think, that's amazing. And you fill up with genuine intrinsic excitement for auditioning for that character. That's your knee-jerk reaction. But then you remember, oh, my parents wanted me to be a doctor. And you suppress that excitement and you go back to medical school. Some people's whole career, some people's whole marriage, so much of their existence can be a mask and they don't realize it. And I think it's those knee-jerk reactions to things in our life that can be your inner child screaming out, trying to remind you of what you actually care about and what you want to do.
I love that example. Firstly, because my parents wanted me to be a doctor, and indeed I became a doctor. And secondly, because I think it really underpins one of the ADHD experiences, which is difficulty distinguishing between imagination and reality. And that makes it sound like a deficit, which it isn't, but it's more like I have shower thoughts, get in the shower every morning, and it's like this beautiful fruit tree has just come into fruit, and there's all these ideas just falling off the tree. And I'm like, I need to capture all these fruits that are falling off the tree. And I've now realised that it's okay to let some of them fall on the ground. That it would be wonderful. I always thought I wanted to be like a singer in a cabaret club. In another life, maybe, but not right now. That sometimes the fruit is allowed to fall to the ground, because the joy of ADHD is there'll always be more fruit. Always. It's like a tree which is forever in fruit. Particularly when you're in flow and when you've slept well. So it's allowing yourself to have. You talk about, what is it, the ideas shelf?
Yes, the metaphorical ideas shelf.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a now, soon, later basket now.
Oh, amazing. Love it. Yeah, similar.
Soon, later. And then people who now work with me go, could we put that in the later pile? Meaning probably never. But yeah.
Yeah, I have 3 baskets at home, actually. One's for washing, actually. If it's like, I can wear this again, or this needs washing, or this definitely needs washing.
Love it.
The sniff test kind of distinguishes which one it goes into.
Is that going in the podcast? No, the 3 thing is really important, because I'll often talk about the rule of 3s, that don't overwhelm your working memory with more than 3 categories. So if I'm tidying up, it's like keep, throw, not sure.
Right, yeah.
So like you, it's like maybe wear again. And actually, to be fair, I do have a chair. So we have a washing basket, the chair of like probably rewear, and then the cupboard.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it gets it all off the floor as well, so you don't trip over.
So you don't fall over.
Yeah. Trying to organise the doom pile of clothes. Quick brain teaser for you all. A question only those with an IQ above 200 can answer. We're 7 minutes in. So what time is it? Yes, that's right. It's Tiimo app time. The award-winning Tiimo app is the perfect life-hacking tool to help your time management and kick you up the bum when you need it most. If you want to stay ahead of the competition, then the visual planning Tiimo app is specifically designed to help your structuring, organising, focusing, and goal setting. For those who struggle to initiate tasks or find big tasks too overwhelming to even start, Tiimo AI Planning Assistant transforms a single prompt into a structured plan to get the ball rolling. It has a visual timer providing a tangible, visual, and colourful representation of time to help users pace themselves so you never miss a deadline ever again. It also offers lock and home screen widgets to keep your tasks in view for those of you who are very out of sight, out of mind with your chores and afraid you might forget them. It brilliantly centres all your tasks in one place to streamline your overflowing schedules and make them much more digestible and a lot less intimidating. Why choose a chaotic life when you can easily download Tiimo app to help get things done? Back to the episode. Anyway, I digress. I've heard you talk about positive psychology.
Yes.
What is positive psychology and what are the benefits to ADHD women?
So positive psychology, it was a term that arose in the 1990s. Martin Seligman, who I think was president of the American Psychological Association, really interesting guy. He wanted to research flourishing and kind of mental well-being. So if you think about it, before that, every gym was like a hospital for the mind. So, if you went along to see a doctor, it would be assumed that you had a deficit. And he was going, maybe you would go and see a psychologist because you had a strength. A bit like, so shifting from a kind of there's everything wrong with people to there might be things right with people. Lots of research in the positive psychology movement on flourishing, and he has come up with work on strengths and values, the 20 universal strengths, and you can go, I think it's called VIA, Strengths Finder online. You can do a free strengths questionnaire. And that was later used by colleagues, Jane Sedgwick Muller and some other colleagues, to do a piece of research on ADHD strengths, showing that successful ADHDers, and this was looking particularly at people who were flourishing, but identifying their strengths within that network. And it's all the things we were talking about. It's courage, transcendence, curiosity, empathy, thinking outside the box, putting other people before yourself, loads and loads of really interesting strengths there. And I think you've mentioned self-awareness, and we're going to keep coming back to it because self-awareness is key, because if you know who you are and you begin to know what your strengths are, then it helps you overcome that ADHD shame. And you can go, yes, I'm not the person to organise a big project over 6 months, but I am the person to come in and do some really high intensity work at various different points. So really understanding your strengths is so key.
Yeah, being great in calm in a crisis. Often everyone's running around panicking, but you're right switched on in that. That adrenaline that makes you see the solution and you go for it. I think it's so interesting. I think sadly a lot of people get an ADHD diagnosis and they go into problem solving mode. How can I become a neurotypical? That's what I feel like I need to do. How can I fix myself? And I think that energy is misplaced. I think it could be better placed in, okay, how can I figure out who I actually am and do very basic self-awareness exercises like the knee-jerk reaction exercises, like asking very basic questions to yourself. What did I do today that made me happy? What did I do today that made me sad? What did I do today that I found easy? What did I do today that I struggled with? Yep. Really basic questions, but you have to be honest, with those answers, because sometimes the mask is so entrenched, you can actually dishonestly answer those. And then therefore it's not a useful exercise. But if you're honest with those very basic questions, you can build up an arsenal of self-awareness that will, I truly believe, enable you to make better choices and say yes to things that are a better alignment with your core. And when you do that, you're going to stick at that relationship. You're going to become the world's best person at that new hobby. You're going to be amazing in that job. You're not going to abandon. You're not going to quit. You're not going to break up. Therefore, you're not going to have the shame associated with a history of abandonment will be massively reduced.
And I think what's really interesting about what you're saying there, first of all, you mentioned that calm in a crisis. And that is a classic ADHD strength because of this tidal nature, that we're really good under stress very often. And we can talk about that in a minute because there's some very nice science around that. But that noradrenaline surge gets us into a sweet spot where we just sort of suddenly, and I remember as a doctor, being in A&E, somebody comes in, they're very unwell. I actually used to enjoy that kind of hot breath of death on your neck. You're like, oh, this has got me in my sweet spot. Super focused, super sharp, really performing, really hopefully helping this person out at this point. So there's a definite ADHD strength there. But what it leads to is a tendency to lean into rushing and to lean into stress because we know it helps us focus. And so you end up with a pattern of leaning into this tidal kind of, I'm going to jump into that tide, I'm going to surf into it because I know it's going to get me where I want to go. But then it's how do you get out of that? And what you've just described is actually just slowing down. So slowing down for long enough to go, where am I? What did I do today? What worked? Just slowing down because the tides are very strong and we get drawn into things that we shouldn't do. And it's learning to recognize when you're in those tides and to raise a hand to say, can you help me here? I seem to be in one of my patterns. I don't know how to get out, or I could do with you just pausing me a bit. So what did I enjoy today? What was difficult? What triggered me? So real self-awareness is so important.
Do you think it helps to also, I suppose it comes as a consequence of working on your self-awareness, you begin to recognize what your, and they'll be very individual to everyone, but what your personal early signs of burnout are?
Totally. Yes. Because burnout can be worn by some people as a kind of badge of pride, and certainly overwork is worn by many people as a badge of pride. But, burnout is very classically the stage that we get to before we get depressed, and you get this kind of reduction in, so there's 3 signs of burnout. There's a reduction in energy, and I hope I'm going to get this right. And there's also a loss of sense of efficacy, so you lose a sense that you're being effective, and you also become quite cynical and detached from what you're doing. So that's the classic burnout pattern. But for people with ADHD, it may be a bit different, because quite often I find with ADHD is they will be flying and on the edge of burnout. They'll be having a great time. Everything's going really, really well, but then there's just that little spidey sense that you're beginning to get overwhelmed. And that's why we talk in my business called ADHD Ed, Overcome the Overwhelm, because that overwhelm is often a sense of, oh, hang on, I'm beginning to tip into not being okay. So it's recognizing, is it lack of sleep? Is it irritability? Is it running persistently late? I find my subconscious will help me. Like once when I was quite burnt out, I just repeatedly lost the house keys. So I couldn't do the meetings I was supposed to be in because I was locked out of my own house. It's like, hang on, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I've becoming aware of what mine are. So, and if I'm ordering more takeaway food, it sounds ridiculous. If I'm like walking into things.
No, that's not. That's dyspraxia. developmental coordination disorder. Do you know about that link?
But a little bit, yeah. I mean, I've noticed recently. I've had a very busy week. It was Neurodiversity Celebration Week a few weeks ago. Absolutely love it, but things went up to sort of gear 5. Loads of work on. I was stubbing my toe all the time, walking into the corner of the coffee table because I was so in the zone. Things that were also important, like taking care of myself, just got forgotten about. I started eating crap, stubbing my toe, missing my runs. And for me, it was like those little signs that, okay, you're skipping the really important stuff that is really going to be detrimental to the important stuff, the other important stuff, if that gets skipped.
Totally. So you're just, that's a really lovely description of that. And I really relate to this idea of you get drawn into something you're enjoying and you're rewarded by it. So you've got that nice, potentially hyper-focus, the reward, you're feeling this is good. And yet at the same time, you're the less immediately rewarding but routine things that keep you well, like eating. I mean, it's basic, but eating, exercise, remembering to sleep. Those really basic things get missed because they're less rewarding than very often it's work. I work a lot with entrepreneurs, and lawyers and musicians and all sorts of interesting people. And because work can be so rewarding, it's almost addictive. But if you don't look after your body will begin to tell you.
Gosh, yeah, the more you learn about it, the more you start seeing this sort of Venn diagram of, well, I thought I just had ADHD, but actually I've got a fair bit of that and a fair bit of autism maybe.
Well, it's not single things. I think, we talk about, I've mentioned a bit that ADHD research is new, but neurodiversity research is also really new because essentially our techniques to understand the brain are developing all the time. And we used to think very much in the neurotransmitter model, that kind of it's a single neurotransmitter there's not enough of. And now we think much more in the network model, that in fact there are large brain networks which are really complex and need to be modelled. And so there's really emerging science. And it's an umbrella. So I used to say to people, if you major in one neurodivergent condition, you'll probably minor in another. Whereas now we use a constellation. So there are lots of different ways of being.
You describe yourself as a natural psychiatrist?
Yeah.
What's the difference between a natural psychiatrist and a psychiatrist?
So I made up the term the natural psychiatrist because it's really a reflection of who I was, of a developing sense of self-awareness of what I brought to the party. Because I was a successful psychiatrist, but was also really unhappy and couldn't work out why, but it was this identity piece. I didn't see myself. I didn't see other doctors who were like me. I didn't really know who I was, and it was that real self-awareness piece. But the natural psychiatrist sort of emerged from an understanding that there are 3 ways to treat any mental illness. You can use medicines, and many of those work really well. And you can definitely use therapy, and therapies can be very effective, particularly when there's a good rapport between therapist and client. So there's medication and therapy. Those are the kind of 2 of the legs of the stool. But the 3rd leg of the stool, which is the most important, the one that keeps it standing up, is everything else. And by everything else, I mean everything from group-based outdoor exercise to mindfulness to cold water swimming to changing what you eat to giving up alcohol to joining a choir, everything else. And everything else is massively powerful. And that's what the natural psychiatrist is. It's teaching that to say to people, if I can teach you to mend your mental health, then you might never have to see me again. You might take the doctor with you. It's like that teach a man to fish. You feed him for life. You teach people to improve their mental health. They don't need to see a psychiatrist. And you won't be surprised to know, Alex, there are not enough psychiatrists to go round. There's probably, I've calculated, about 1 psychiatrist doing primary care mental health for every 12,500 people who need one. So there's just not enough psychiatrists to go around. So if I can teach people to improve their mental health, then actually that's a massively helpful thing to do. And that's what the natural psychiatrist is.
I read on your website, Judith, that you said education can be as powerful as medication for treating ADHD in adults. I guess that's what you're talking about. It's kind of understanding what are the natural ways you can get out, move, listen to music, raise certain chemicals rather than medication. But what would you say is like the top 5 or 3 tips, things people could do that would boost their mood and focus?
But the top 2, let's go with mindfulness. Mindfulness, really well evidence-based in ADHD. Unbelievably hard to do if you have ADHD. Because basically we're saying, we're trying to calm the chatter of the mind. And so we have to adapt our mindfulness offering. So it's something really simple, like you could mindfully run, you can mindfully dance, you can mindfully listen to music. But that checking in with yourself, that who am I, where am I, what am I doing, how long do I have, that checking in is a form of mindfulness. And then exercise, massively helpful for ADHD.
Exercise has been such a game changer for me. I mean, I get out every morning, I walk my dog, I try and get a run in. The trajectory of my day, if I skip that run, is significant. And if I can't get outside, if I'm just feeling a bit crappy or the weather's rubbish, I just do like 20 star jumps in the mirror. And even that, I keep it going throughout the day. And the trajectory of how that impacts my focus throughout the day is significant. Super interestingly, I read on your website, just following on from that, you said, our training improved stress mindset immediately with greater improvements at 4 weeks. How can you measure this, and what techniques do you use that could help in the ADHD community?
So that's a quote from a piece of work I did for a business on stress management. So this is just after the pandemic, and a business asked me to go in and help managers manage stress better. So we use something called Sparks tools from Stanford, and that's been developed by Dr. Alia Crum, who you may have heard of. She's on the Huberman podcast. She talks a lot about stress mindset. So we were using the stress is enhancing model. So explaining that stress is actually the way our body prepares us to overcome a challenge. And so it's not bad. We shouldn't be trying to live a stress-free life. And so we used the Sparks tools in the morning and then the afternoon of that course, and saw an improvement in stress mindset across the day. And then 4 weeks later, we saw a greater improvement. And what was really useful for me about that work is it helped me to understand the noradrenaline piece for ADHDers and the way that we use stress as a way of finding focus. So in my experience, people with ADHD will often cope with a slightly higher amount of stress and find that sweet spot, that mental clarity that you and I have both described in quite stressful situations. So we have a slightly different response to stress.
So interesting. I've always suspected that I'm sort of massively driven by stress, and listening to you describe that, I think confirms it. But I always question whether my stress is almost like coming from a natural place, or if it's coming from an internal feeling of not being good enough. And I wonder if that is of higher density within the ADHD community, this intrinsic feeling of not being enough sometimes. Do we therefore have a higher level of stress, and is the way we deal with that stress unique?
So there's some interesting research that came out a couple of years ago looking at anxiety and ADHD, and that we overcome the lack of focus through our tendency to worry and our tendency to apply stress. So we're sort of turning up the stress dial in a way that then makes us successful because we find focus. And so I think there's an interesting link there, and I suspect it's probably intrinsic. It's sort of how many of us are wired. And you're very successful, Alex. So your stress has served you well. It may not be easy to live with.
I'm also an alcoholic.
Yes, but you're an alcoholic in recovery.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah.
And that requires courage, it requires resilience, it requires self-awareness. So that's not a small thing. That's successful too.
Yeah, no, true. Good way of reframing it. Very much. When I find something, again, that has connected with my core, like this podcast, before it was social media, and still very much is. And you could argue this podcast, well, it is built on social media, but when that got taken away from me in my previous career, it triggered a big court case. Like my obsession got stolen from me, and my knee jerk was alcohol. So I think having that awareness, and that nearly killed me. I went to hospital, and I've told this story. So I think it's so important and it's also, do you think it's quite a risky territory when someone with ADHD kind of finds their thing, that thing that they're just going full steam towards being really good at, but if they have that taken away, pulled away, and then they're sort of left in this void, directionless, do you think that's a very vulnerable position for someone with ADHD to be in? It can be,
I think, yeah. I mean, and your story is really, it's really compelling, and it's really inspiring as well, because it's a story of losing so much and yet also finding the courage to recover, which is amazing. And that you've found your, love again, which is podcast, social media, and the interest in ADHD, and sharing this for the benefit of other people, which is very altruistic. So it's a really inspiring story. And I think one of the advantages of ADHD is there is a creativity, because I also lost my passion. I lost the thing that I was good at. I wasn't able to continue with psychiatry after a while. And we can talk about that a bit more in a minute. But and so I had a very strong sense that I was lost for a while. And actually that wasn't a bad place to be. There's nothing wrong with being lost if it means that it's a chance to find yourself. If it's a chance to reflect, to journal, to become more self-aware, to go, well, that was a screw up. What am I going to do differently now? What did you learn from that screw up?
Yeah,
you know?
Trust your intuition massively. I remember that day I signed that bit of paper. My intuition, which I now know is so strong with ADHD people, was screaming at me. I sensed that they were not on my side, but I didn't listen to it, and it nearly cost me my life through getting screwed over in business.
Do you talk about intuition screaming at you? My inner self sometimes has screamed at me, not that way, not that way. Don't go there. And you do it, and then you're like, why did I do that? But it's because, logically it all looks good, but I think that there is often a very strong, people talk about the sixth sense, and they talk about sensory sensitivities in neurodiversity. The ability to intuit others' mental states is a sixth sense, and it can be hypersensitive in us, those of us who are neurodivergent. And that's both a blessing and a curse.
Do you think it's a bit of an internal contradiction or a tug of war? Because yes, we have amazing intuition and we can sense when someone is trying to screw us over or might be toxic or is not a good fit for us, particularly at an early start of a relationship. Like sometimes we can see someone's true character, but we might not have the internal confidence to actually listen to it. So we get into that relationship regardless of that inner intuition telling us that it's not a good idea.
It's a blessing and a curse. I think there's two sides to it. There's the knowing, and then there's the have you got the courage to then take action and do. And I think that takes practice. And that people-pleasing piece as well about ADHD. As an ADHD, often we're like, oh no, this is the right thing to do and I'm doing it for other people. And then I have a sticker at home, a postcard that says, stop me before I volunteer again. Because you can be very impulsive and go, yes, of course. No. So it's learning to say, and I think that thing of, I now have a technique, which is if I think I'm going to say yes to something, I'll go, let me get back to you.
Yes.
Rather than
break between the ask and your response.
Because you never know if you've got time to do the thing you've been asked to do. And it's quite embarrassing to admit, actually, that the thing that you've been asked to do, you don't want to do or you can't do because you can't focus for it. So
we see it so often in the workplace, sadly. I speak in companies, and one of the biggest struggles that I hear is that they know that they don't have the capacity. They know that that person that is asking them to do that new project might not have their best interests at heart. Like they see it, they're not silly, but it's that internal tug of war, contradiction. The people pleaser within them just says yes. So they say yes to that project. They say yes to that demand on their time. And then before they know it, they've said yes to too much. They've overcommitted. And then they're lying in bed. They can't sleep because they're so anxious at how much work they've taken on.
Yep.
Do you see the ADHD, neurodivergent conditions, as well as the intuition? Do you see it showing up in the workplace? I want to talk about the positives, but at first, do you see what struggles do you see it creating in the workplace?
Well, I think when you have a neurodivergent colleague and they've got particular strengths, very often the workplace goes, oh, that's amazing. We'll give them all this particular sort of work to do. So I remember working with a partner in a firm who was incredibly good at certain very highly technical things. And so everybody's like, well, just give him all this highly technical stuff to do. But they also expected him to be good at everything else. And then I was thinking, but how can you expect this man to be a technical genius in this area, which requires immense hyperfocus? Like the cognitive effort that went into doing what he was doing was vast. And at the same time, people are saying, well, you need to run your own diary, you need to send your own emails, you need to do your own timesheets. It's like, you just don't get it, do you? This is not how people's brains work. You don't get the genius, you don't get the kind of amazing hyperfocus, the ability to deliver all this stuff, and also the person who's going to turn up on time with all their notes beautifully highlighted, not having forgotten their own shoes. I mean, sorry, speaking personally.
No, so interesting. It's so true. We have amazing positives, but we also struggle with certain things. I think it's a lot of the shame that comes with those struggles that can stop someone asking for help. Like if someone's listening and they have ADHD or another neurodivergent condition, and they know that they're anxiety, the bits that they struggle with are stopping them from being able to do the job that they're being paid to do, they're able to do, but there's something in the work environment that's blocking them. How would you advise that person to ask for help? Like, how can they ask for help? Because when I speak in companies, the question I get a lot is, I want to ask for help, but I'm scared that it's going to be met with stigma, bullying, discrimination, being worked out of the company, you know, in the worst case scenario. And I've spoken to people who have taken that claims to court and all that's another conversation. But in that moment where you need to ask for help, but you don't know how to approach your boss or your line manager, like how do you approach that? How do you even start that conversation?
So it's a really good question, because I also work with companies and often see them struggling with this, which is this sort of, oh, well, people just need to disclose and then it will all be fine. You know, just say you've got ADHD. Not actually that helpful. A, because it's a condition recognised under the Disability Discrimination Act. So you don't have to disclose the condition. And you may be stigmatised if you do. So I talk with people about the idea of saying, I am the kind of person who. So I'm the kind of person who really needs some quiet to give you my best work. And focus on the company's needs. Like, if you want the best out of me, it would be really helpful if we could look at some coaching at work, if we could look at a colour-coded diary, if we could look at a quiet room to work in, if we could look at flexible working. So, and the difficulty with that, Alex, if I'm honest, is that it puts a lot of emphasis on the individual to be self-aware enough and also to know what they can ask for. And that is a lot of emphasis on the individual. Unfortunately, though, because neurodiversity is diverse, every individual's needs are going to be different. So we can't expect a company to go, blanket, everybody gets this. What we can expect a business is to say we have a universal design approach. You've heard of universal design? Yeah, so Professor Nancy Doyle talks a lot about this, and the team at Birkbeck, who've done lots of work in neurodiversity at work, talk about this. And it's basically designing an environment where anybody can ask for the adjustments they need. So if you're deaf, you can say, it'd be really helpful if the businesses, you know, if we can link Teams to my hearing aids. It's all the basic stuff. And neurodiversity inclusion would be fit within that. But it requires the neurodivergent to be able to say, what really helps me is flexible working or really explicit instructions. This is a big issue, is when companies are vague. Or, oh God, my bugbear, somebody asks me to do something and they don't give me a deadline. It's like, it will not happen unless there is a deadline. Yeah. I need to know when, otherwise it's literally not going to happen. Unless it's something I'm really interested in doing, in which case I'm probably already doing it.
Yeah.
So
it's so true. I think it is like everyone has different needs. So like you said, I hear people quite often on LinkedIn or something just put out quite blanket a list of adjustments that might be beneficial for some, but are quite sort of stereotypical. Like, we'll just normalize the use of fidget toys. And it's, you know, I have one in my hand all the time. It helps me, but for many, they'll need different needs. So I think it's about creating an environment of psychological safety, and you need to put signals out to make it clear that the environment is safe for someone to ask for help, and it's not going to be met with discrimination. Because everyone's needs will be different, and you need to make people feel safe that if they do ask, then it will be met with care and empathy. How do you think because you can do various things. You can put a policy on your website. You can bring in neurodivergent speakers. You can send an email out to the company wide to say, please submit. We want to help. We want to know how. How do you think you can create a culture of psychological safety within a company where if someone has ADHD, they can feel comfortable to ask for help? So
it's a really good question. And I think there's so many elements to the question. Psychological safety is obviously, it's a very important term at the moment. It's emerging as a term in businesses. And there's so many layers to it, because actually it's about having a safe to fail culture, where you can give feedback to more senior people to say, this doesn't work very well for me. It's about a culture where outsider voices are included, and an effort is made to ensure that everybody's voices are included.
People with ADHD are the world's best problem solvers. I truly believe that, because we've had to solve problems our entire lives in order to survive. We have had to find unique solutions to really, really challenging problems from a really early age, because we are a little bit different. And that's fine, but as a consequence of that, we've had to adapt, and we've had to look at things in a new way and think outside the box in order to find solutions. And I think That's a huge benefit in the workforce, having a diverse pool of brain talent in the office. So when a problem does come into the company, you haven't got just one, you haven't got two, you've got 15 complex, original solutions to that problem. That your competitor, who might not be adopting neurodiverse conditions, they won't have that advantage.
No.
I think it's so important to really appeal to the bottom line. Unfortunately, for some people, you have to. 80% of neurodivergent employees will leave within, I think it's 3 or 4 months if their accommodations aren't met. And of course, there's a retraining, rehiring cost.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to attack it from that angle. Yeah, that's so fascinating. I've heard you as well talk about vicarious trauma.
Yeah.
What is vicarious trauma and how can that affect someone?
So vicarious trauma, it links to this idea. So I'll define it first, sorry. Vicarious trauma is essentially being traumatized by traumatic material you're exposed to. It's not your traumatic material, it's other people's. So an example might be, say, lawyers working in family law or in a lawyer on a homicide case. They might be exposed to lots of traumatic material, traumatic videos, traumatic depositions. Now, in my career as a psychiatrist, I'm a woman, as you recognise, and I saw an awful lot of women who'd experienced sexual assault, and I saw a lot of women who were very traumatised, and over the years listened to many, many stories of trauma. And I think for neurodivergent people who can be very emotionally attuned, we've talked about that sixth sense, you begin to mirror other people's trauma responses. You begin to actually develop symptoms of trauma yourself. So I ended up with things like nightmares, being murdered, all sorts of unpleasant symptoms, which was to some extent that vicarious trauma.
Do you think someone with ADHD, therefore, could potentially be more susceptible to experiencing this type of trauma? And I suppose, where would that be coming from?
So it's a really interesting question. I don't know that we have the evidence to support that, but theoretically we could argue that they could because of this default mode network piece, where if you are using your default mode network to mirror, and we know the default mode network has many, many functions, one of which is to mirror other people's internal states. So you're mirroring and empathizing with others, and you're perhaps less aware of yourself and your own needs, which is something else we've talked about. So that kind of ability to empathize whilst the difficulty prioritizing your own needs means that you can end up, in my experience, I see lots of people with ADHD who do this, who experience trauma. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here as well, which is I see lots of people with ADHD becoming coaches. Now, this exactly mirrors my experience nearly 20 years ago. I went off and trained to be a coach. Actually, I needed coaching. But because I was so curious and I loved learning, I was like, I know, I'll go and be a coach. So I went off and learned to be a coach, loved it, and then thought, as I went through the process, I thought, I don't need to be a coach, I need to have coaching. And I think there can be difficulty sometimes distinguishing between meeting our own needs and meeting others' needs. And it takes practice to balance those, because you can do both. You can be a really good ADHD coach and meet your own needs. And probably through the process of learning to be a coach, you learn to meet your own needs. So it's a very fluid thing.
Do you think that's related to the fact that the wellness industry and the self-help industry is in such a boom at the moment? What do you think that says about society, that there is this deep, huge demand for finding inner peace?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? So well-being is massive. It's very valuable. We globally as a society are wealthier than we were, although that wealth isn't very well distributed. We are wealthier. And if you're very wealthy, you're going to be looking to maximize other things. And what are you going to maximize? You want to maximize your health. You want to get the most joy out of life, because money doesn't bring you happiness. So once you've solved the money equation, it's like, what do I do now? I turn to well-being. And, we're a less spiritual, less religious society than we used to be. So well-being is beginning to answer that, which is why you can get caught up. There are some people in the well-being world, selling quasi-religious experiences. So it's kind of the opium of the masses at the moment, is well-being. That's what I would say. It's what we're all looking for, is in this world where things are difficult, where do I find peace and contentment?
Yes, it's huge, isn't it? I think people with ADHD, again, that intuition can probably protect you in spotting the grifter or the person who might not be truly as righteous as they're portraying, and selling something maybe for their own financial gain rather than actually wanting to help the community.
You hope so.
Hopefully.
I do hope so, yeah. Yeah, that would be nice to think, wouldn't it?
Sorry to interrupt with an ad read. I know it can ignite rage, but a brief word from our sponsor. You'll hate slow talkers like I do, so I'll keep this snappy. If you've ever wanted the specialised support of a highly qualified, world-renowned, Harvard-educated ADHD psychiatrist right there with you at all times, now's your chance. The one and only Dr. Ned Hallowell, ADHD specialist and best-selling author, has worked with some of the brightest minds in the ADHD world to develop an app that makes his knowledge on how to manage ADHD and stress accessible to all. Features include customized and tailored daily exercises to stimulate the cerebellum and proven to help manage those trickier aspects of ADHD. 4 sessions of virtual ADHD individual coaching tailored to your needs, a self-EMDR program, a cutting-edge treatment for ADHD to help target that unwanted stress and anxiety with 2 personal coaching sessions. Lastly, if you've not officially been diagnosed yet, the app offers several reliable self-administered diagnostic assessments of ADHD that can help you see if you actually have ADHD. And the app includes daily coaching tips written by Dr. Ned Hallowell for how to best utilize each day on the program. All of this and more is just a thumb swipe away with the Hallowell Brain Health app. The app is available for the tablet or smartphone, 10% off if you use the link in the bio. Back to the episode. Just finally, Judith, this has been truly, truly fascinating. Or penultimately, what moves you the most when helping ADHD women and guiding them through their struggles?
Seeing people validated. That moment where somebody goes, oh, it wasn't just me. Nope, it wasn't just you. Because the big fear when you go and see a psychiatrist is you're frightened that you're going mad. And actually the power of education is to say, no, this is a normal response to a really difficult situation. You're not going mad, you're going sane. It's a really sane response to what's happening in your life. And I'm always flattered when people, or when I was running my clinical practice, when people would cry, because it's like, well, this is a place to weep. This is a place to let go of that masking. So I think validation and people being heard and listened to and believed is hugely moving, because very often they've experienced not being believed for a long, long time. Absolutely.
Wow. I think you've really so accurately summarised the experience of so many of our listeners. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I want to talk about your ADHD item finally, Judith.
Oh, yes.
You've been patiently waiting underneath that cloth for our entire conversation. I ask all my guests to bring in an item that most represents ADHD. It ends up on the shelves behind us, but for now, yours is underneath this cloth. I'm going to reveal it before the explanation.
Fabulous. Oh, he's fallen over.
Oh, the dog. It's a puppy. Is it a puppy? It's a dog.
He's a puppy. Yeah, he's a puppy. And so he links to a metaphor that I use. So I run various courses for ADHD, which use kind of an awareness and regulation coaching model. And one of the things we talk about is, we talk about neurotransmitters and we talk about that tidal nature of neurotransmitters. We also talk about networks. We haven't talked so much about networks today, but maybe another time, because the puppy is the default mode network. And so the default mode network of the brain is the part of the brain that struggles to switch off with ADHD. And we only discovered it maybe 20, 25 years ago. So it's new and it's complex, scientifically complex. It does all sorts of things. But the default mode network is the part of our brain that is curious. It wanders. It doesn't want to stay on the path like the central executive network. Like a puppy, it wants to wander off the path. And it's looking for new ways of doing things. And it's playful. And it's creative, just like a puppy. And just like a puppy, it needs looking after. It needs exercise. It needs sleep. It needs rest. And it does not need to be beaten. And that's why I use the metaphor of the puppy and the path when we teach the networks of ADHD, because when we understand our networks and we begin to get a feeling for what they might be and a feeling for what's going on, we know instinctively what that puppy needs. So that's my puppy.
It's so fascinating, and I'm going to remember that because I have a dog. I'm going to firstly dog default network, but my dog went off the path 2 days ago and came back covered in horse poo. So I will very much remember that analogy. Judith, truly fascinating. Thank you so much. I want to finally do the ADHD agony aunt section,
Great.
Which is called the washing machine of woes, because my ADHD item is this washing machine.
That's fabulous. Is it a toy?
It is. I think it actually works. I think it's got the plumbing. If you actually want to connect it to a water source, you can put in the detergent or whatever, the powder in here. and they claimed it worked. I don't believe them. It doesn't look like it works. Looks like it will definitely leak.
But that reminds me of what I used to say about rumination. That rumination is like a washing machine. It's the same worry sock, goes round and round and round.
Right.
You know, when you have a worry, it just keeps going round. So I love that you're using it, the washing machine of woe.
That is a really good connection, actually. My connection is a lot more basic than that, and that's only because I just always leave my clothes in the machine after every cycle.
But no, I love it. Washing machine of woe.
Yeah. Well, I'm using the Tiimo app now, which is the sponsor, and I'm getting better.
Okay.
How are you at your laundry memory, getting it out of the machine?
Okay, so we have someone who helps us with our laundry. I'm really embarrassed to say. But she said to me the other day, she said, don't forget to bring the laundry in. What did I do? I forgot to bring the laundry in. So I'm not great at doing laundry, to be fair. Yeah. Shrunk things, lost things, forget things.
Well, good. Well, we're collectively making the audience feel less alone, because I know that is also quite a common issue. This week, Judith, in the washing machine of woes, somebody has written in and asked, gosh, this is a big one this week. Someone's asked, I never hold down a job for too long because my seniors misunderstand my neurodivergence for incompetence, but I need stable work just to survive, and it's really hard and terrifying. Do you have any advice for someone like me who is struggling to integrate into a workforce for long periods of time?
Really good question. There's a key word in there, and that word is incompetence. So I think bit of a cognitive reframe. You're not incompetent. Maybe there's just certain things that you struggle with. So if you can raise awareness of what the things are that are difficult, and go into a job really kind of going, these things will be difficult for me. And ask for help with those as soon as you can. And the other thing is to raise awareness of your strengths. What do you bring to a business? Because when a business can see, actually, this person's really good at this particular thing, it may be customer service, it may be that you're really good working in a team, it may be that you're really good working to a deadline. When you can explain your strengths and also explain what you need help, support with, that really, really helps. I would say take that kind of self-awareness piece of, these are the things I struggle with, please can I have help? And these are the things I actually would recognise as strengths that I bring to this business. And also self-care. That's the other thing, is that ADHD gets worse when we're sleep deprived, or when we've had too much to drink, or anything to drink, or when we haven't exercised. So if you can use your job as a sort of structure within, to hang off some self-care, and do so.
Massively helpful, so helpful. You've hit the nail on the head. Like, it's about really being clear to the person you're asking for help to, but also to yourself. Like, what are my struggles? What do I need help with? And really being honest. Thank you so much on behalf of the user, the listener who wrote that. Just finally, Judith, one more thing. I need to deliver you a letter. Oh, a letter that was written by the previous guest.
Okay.
And posted in that post box.
Right.
The previous guest, Judith, wrote 3 rules to live by, and I'm going to deliver the letter to you. And if you could kindly open it and read their 3 rules.
Lovely. Thank you very much. This is really exciting, I feel. Okay.
I can't remember what they wrote.
So 3 rules to live by. Learn how to communicate well.
That's exactly what we were just saying. That's how creepy is that? Be clear.
Love it. Relationships are vital to your well-being, so be open, honest, and compassionate to your friends, colleagues, and family. Actually, I think it says lovers. Or friends, colleagues, lovers, and family, who knows? And take time to care for yourself in all ways, specifically physically, intellectually. Amazing.
Really useful.
Really
we'll
useful.
Kindly ask you to write your 3 rules after this conversation.
Excellent. Can I put any surprises in for the next person so they open it up and go, ooh, I can't read that out?
You can write whatever you like. And I'm fascinated to know what you're going to write, but I'll save it for the next reveal.
I promise to behave myself.
Judith, again, thank you so much. It's been a true privilege to chat to you today.
Thank you very much, Alex.